Michael, I'm going to. So now that Clayton is on board, welcome Clayton. Sorry I didn't get that link to you a little bit more efficiently, so I apologize. We have all of the panelists here. We have several guests, and so we're very happy about that. I just want to kind of do just kind of officially start it. Thank you very Josh for handling that really well. I appreciate it. So welcome everybody. I'm glad you are all here for this open forum. This is an Ask a Pro number 14, where we basically talk about anything that has to do with an accessory dwelling unit. And this is the largest group of professionals who work every day, all day with accessory dwelling units. So it's going to be exciting. We're just going to do, again, some little bit of introductions. And because this is going to be recorded, then it's going to be posted on my various social media platforms. And then I always share it with everybody so that they can use it however they want to. And to be able to kind of have that sort of educational component, because there is so many things to know about ADUs. And I thought I knew them until I started doing my 734 square foot ADU, and I'm about 80% done. And wow, there is so much to learn and to know. And I've also gotten a lot of information from these people that are here. Roy, John, Hillary, and Josh and Clayton have been wonderful contributors to the How to ADU community, which a lot of us participate in, which is not for promotion, which is a little bit more about this, just the context of this particular meeting. We're not going to be touting the companies that we work for. You can ask questions. I encourage all of the panelists to put your information into the chat. That's not going to be posted anywhere that's going to violate any group's particular anti-promotion rules. So please put it in here so that the folks that are here can have that. I think it's going to be good. They're going to want it too. If you have a question, until after we're done with kind of the initial introductions and who we are and some of our initial thoughts, just raise your hand and then you can unmute yourself and you can ask that question. Also feel free to put questions into the chat function and then we will be sure to address that. Again, thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time. This is fantastic. And thank you to the people that are here online with us. And if you're watching this recording, thanks for being able to watch it and having your interest. Josh started off with a little bit of introductions, I'm going to start it, then we can kind of go around the horn. My name is David Donahue. I have several ADU-focused companies. I am building a 734 square foot detached ADU. It's going to be a one bedroom, one bath, about 80% done. I threw in a lot of curveballs to my general contractor. I changed the HVAC system. I changed the siding that was going to be available. And we're just doing a bunch of different things, and I've delayed our project by 2 months, at least. So that's a little bit about what I do. Josh, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Josh Gould. Recently retired designer, builder with a focus on residential energy upgrades. Basically worked for many companies doing this for years and years and years. I just recently finished 650 square foot ADU in my backyard, and it's been rented for 3 months successfully now. And as I said, I put a focus on energy efficiency, and I think I'm in line for a net zero qualification, but only after a year's worth of billing and living in the the ADU can we determine that for sure. But I've got all the high efficiency technology built into it, so I spent a premium probably on that square footage. And I did all the work primarily myself with maybe just 3 or 4 subcontractors to do things like the solar, the concrete work. But basically, I'm a do-it-all kind of guy.
And could you share how many hours that you spent on your own? Because you have a very meticulous record keeping.
What did we figure out? Was it
4,200?
4,200?
4,200 hours is what Josh spent of his own time doing that. I think that segues very well into the introduction for Roy, because he's a HERS energy expert.
Yeah, great to be here. So our expertise, or my expertise, lie within Title 24 Energy Code, HERS testing, green building analysis, or green building ordinance, and anything essentially energy efficient in regards to building science or mechanical equipment, any of that nature. So I'm here to help with any questions on that. And it sounds like Josh might be available for some tax rebates as well if he's already renting the ADU. So that's a good start.
Yes. Yes, I'm taking full advantage of all of that.
We're going to go back to that because there's a good thing that he did that I did not do in a timely manner. Jon, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Jon Grishpu. A few years ago, I started a company to matchmake homeowners with general contractors. So any type of project that requires a general contractor is something we can help with. Anything from a small bathroom remodel all the way to new construction, including ADUs. We started our business around middle of 2019. So right as we were getting started, ADUs were just at the cusp of getting very, very popular here in Southern California and across California. So I work day in, day out with homeowners, with general contractors, vetting the good ones from the bad ones, helping homeowners understand the ins and outs of the process of finding a contractor, hiring a contractor, and working with a contractor from the very beginning of the ideation of an ADU project all the way to project completion.
And Jon, I thank you for that, and I'm going to spend some time drilling down on it because there's a couple really very recent comments on the How to ADU Facebook page of what happens when you, even if you think you vetted them well, and I want to circle back to that. Hillary, if you could.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hillary Seiler. I have been in construction, financing, and lending for going on 13 years now. Started financing ADUs and helping with the code that was written for the city of Portland in 2010 with Cole Peterson. Got connected with him, started helping people understand how the mortgage world actually meets the ADU world. And so I've always enjoyed being able to make your property do something for you on top of being something that you live in. I like passive streams of income. I'm a big fan of millionaires have 7 streams of income. So this is one way to do it. And as a lender, that's been my passion, has been construction. So that's what I do. That's why I love ADUs. And if you have any questions about financing or interest rates, because we've already started the conversation, has questions right now, fire away.
And Hillary also does things for people that have portfolios of different properties. So let's say you have your primary home that you live in, then you have a rental, whether it's a duplex, fourplex, or whatever, or multiple. She can kind of figure out ways to kind of help you out that are with the programs that are available on a federal, national level that are there. Thank you, Hillary. And Clayton Prescott, please introduce yourself, sir.
Thank you so much, David. My name is Clayton Prescott. I own my own company called PermitDog.com. I do permit expediting in Southern California and nationwide. I've been an expediter now for about 10 years. I've worked on all kinds of projects from skyscrapers to space shuttles to celebrity homes. And now that I have my own company, I'm trying to build a better mousetrap. One of those things is I'd be down at the city and I would see a senior engineer from one of the top engineering firms at the city who usually isn't down doing permitting. I usually do their permitting, and they would just be getting their butt kicked. And I would say, what are you working on? Oh, I'm doing an ADU in my backyard, and none of the other expediters would help me. It's not a big enough job, so I'm just trying to do it myself. And so I'd see these, in that aspect, they're regular people, they're super skilled, but it's really struggling down at the city. So part of Permit Dog's mission is to kind of help everyone, including the regular people that so often don't get served by big league expediters. And doing ADUs is a big part of that. We do a lot of ADUs.
And Clayton, you also work across the state and across the country too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm nationwide.
Thank you very much, Clayton. I appreciate the introductions, everybody. And again, welcome to everybody that's joining in this open forum. So let's see. I think Michael has gone off camera. He had a lot of really good questions. I'm going to wonder if he's going to want to kind of jump back on to see if he wants to ask any of them. So you were here first. Thank you for logging in. What kind of questions do you have? And we're going to just anything you want to have addressed. We're going to try to do it. Unmute yourself, please. Michael, you're still muted.
Okay. Michael Brewer, homeowner, looking to do a garage conversion, ADU conversion in Westchester. and I've done a lot of due diligence, a lot of a lot of legwork, and I'm want to know specifically about financing now. And one of the questions I was asking Hillary was, I want to talk to you in person, but I was asking you, what is a, you kept mentioning FICO scores or credit, credit ratings, and I was asking you what's a good one these days.
740 or higher.
Okay,
740 or higher is considered great. If you're over 700, you can pretty much get financed for anything you want to do. The rates just might be a little higher. If you're under 700, it's a little bit harder to get money right now. And then financing for, here's where ADUs get sticky. So I'm just going to come out and say it right away because the question comes up every time I'm asked. If you're an owner builder or you're a do-it-yourselfer, you can't get a construction loan for an ADU. They aren't available. And the reason, at least through traditional banking, if you want to go hard money or if you want to do a grant program through the state, totally different story. But traditional mortgage loans require a third-party GC who's been in business for at least 3 years, who has a track record of doing this right, so that we make sure we get a finished product at the end of the road. And that's where mortgage loans and ADUs kind of clash a little, because a lot of people value ADUs on the fact that you can build it yourself and get some sweat equity in it, whereas mortgage loans do not like that risk, so lenders won't take it. The option for owner builders right now, really the only option out there that attaches to your actual dwelling, is a home equity line of credit, which is a second mortgage. It allows you to tap into whatever equity you have in the house right now, but it will be a higher interest rate than a first lien on your house, because that lender is going into second position and tapping into that excess equity you have. Banks right now are, as a lot of people have noticed, contracting. They are limiting what they're lending because we are anticipating a recession. I don't know if we're allowed to say we're in one yet. I mean, feels like it, but I don't know if we're allowed to actually say that. And we're based on my number of years doing this and my thesis in college being on the perfect storm of the mortgage market collapse, chances are we're going to see a really nice big restraint on lending, and banks are going to go from lending 90 to 95% on a home equity line, probably down to 80%, because they're anticipating that housing prices are going to drop. At least that's what the economic forecasts are saying, if you're listening to any of that. So for the owner builder, all the way back to interest rates, how you finance it and how your credit score impacts that financing is going to directly depend on what are you building.
Okay, another question, and I have a friend that did this with a person. He did a home improvement loan, but it was a personal, some kind of a personal loan but it was through a bank.
Unsecured personal loans, those are absolutely an option. Most banks will do anything from 50 to 100,000. The difficulty with an unsecured loan is that the interest rates are higher. They can be anywhere from 8.5% if you have phenomenal credit and incredible income, to 25% if it's not so good.
And you're getting into the hard money category when you get that high, aren't you, Hillary?
Yeah, at that point, I mean, people will typically take out an unsecured loan to consolidate debt, not usually to leverage a property. But if you go to a credit union and you get 8% on $100,000, that's actually not the end of the world. You can usually get your ADU built and do it yourself. And I've seen a lot of people do that. The struggle, I will say, Michael, with taking out an unsecured loan is if you don't get enough money on that loan and you don't get your ADU built and you need to go seek more money, you're now over leveraged because you borrowed $100,000. You may not be able to get additional funding. So just knowing what your project is going to cost is incredibly important. Don't overextend yourself, and taking out an unsecured loan can work. I've seen it work, but I've also seen it become a problem for people.
And would that depend too, if you were going to go for more funding, would that depend on your equity and the other factors?
It's going to depend on if you can finish the property or not. I mean, if you need more funding, it depends on what bank it will be. Basically, it comes down to you. What's your financial picture, and is the bank willing to extend an additional line of credit or loan to you? So if you don't finish your product and you need $25,000 more and a bank isn't willing to give that to you, there really isn't going to be an option other than maybe credit cards, which is incredibly dangerous. And I have seen people I've been doing this for 13 years. I had a guy come to me with $125,000 in credit card debt at 25% that he built his ADU on. By the time that we actually refinanced it and he had enough equity to refinance, he had paid almost $40,000 in just interest. That doesn't make sense.
That was a recommendation that you made when you were a guest on an earlier Ask a Pro, is overestimate what you're going to need as far as money and time.
Yes.
And I think that, John, you're probably seeing that too with your clients, is that when you go into these things you may leverage you, or you think it's a garage conversion like Michael's looking at doing, and he wants to be an owner builder, which I think is wonderful, but it's managing all of those trades and all those subs, and you think you have them, you think you've herded all your cats, and then all hell breaks loose.
No, I totally agree. I think that might be something that I said on our Ask a Pro session as well. Always expect to spend at least probably a cushion of 10 to 20% more time and more money. And yes, you can think of everything, but the cost of a certain material might go up in the 6 to 9 months that you're doing the project. Or especially what I see most commonly is a homeowner will get a rough estimate before getting plans finished. And then they hire that contractor, that design build team to develop those plans. And then a couple months later, typically, once the plans are approved and the project's ready to go, then the cost sometimes, or quite often lately, changes. And homeowners think they're being cheated or wronged or lied to by the contractor, but it really is a factor of a lot of different variables at play. But yes, costs can change, and just be ready to spend a little bit more than you think it's going to cost.
So John, let me ask, it seems that, so now Hillary is saying that in order to get one of these traditional construction loans, you'll need a general contractor. So, if I'm looking for a general contractor, I want someone that's going to be honest, responsible, and has a track record. So I'm going to go by reviews. I'm going to go by reviews, what they've done lately. And so my question to you is there a range, like for contractors, is it like, 10% to 20 to 40? I'm hearing numbers all over the place in terms of what contractors will charge and what that would cost you over doing it, being your own general contractor. Like how much can you save by doing it yourself? And how much, what's the range for a good contractor?
That's a great question. And it's a very difficult question to answer because there's, again, so many factors at play. You could very easily look at just on paper, what will I pay this subcontractor? What will I pay this subcontractor to sub all the work out? Or how much time is it going to take me? And do I have the expertise to DIY certain aspects of it? And then compare that to the profit margin for a contractor, which is typically, I'd say 15 to 25%, could be more, could be less, but that's pretty common. But at the same time, what that on paper analysis fails to acknowledge is if someone is taking on a project like this and has never done something like it before, there is commonly going to be room for error. And you may be saving money by hiring your own plumber, but if you don't know exactly what to tell that plumber and you don't know how to evaluate that plumber's work, you may need to redo the work and redo it again, potentially. So that's where a lot of the confusion comes of, I could save so much money by not paying a fee to a general contractor, but are you experienced with project management? Are you experienced with new construction enough to be able to effectively manage the process and find and hire the right subcontractors to execute the various smaller aspects of the work?
So you could have transferable skills, even if you haven't done this particular thing before, you can have skills that will help you to navigate those waters.
John, could I ask you to kind of address how general contractors, because this is the one thing that I didn't, and I've kind of known, but I like to share, is that a lot of GCs have their subs that work below them. And if they're successful and they're keeping them busy, those subs are just going to be staying underneath those contractors because they keep them busy and they're full time. Right. And most of those subs only have to deal with that one GC. They don't have to deal with the public because that is a completely different animal. And if you can kind of talk about that from your perspective.
Yeah, I would say Certainly. A subcontractor would prefer to have a book of work for the rest of the year than to work directly with one homeowner that they may get some other referrals from. Yeah. So when you look at that, if you were to look at it as if you are the subcontractor yourself, sure, I could charge a homeowner more for my services, but I'd rather the consistency of working for a general contractor. So that's a lot of what we've seen over the past few years as well. And perhaps anyone here who has done their own ADU, DIY, or subbing the job out themselves, how difficult has it been to find subs? Because since those subs are all occupied with GCs, or a lot of the good ones are, the issue across LA and everywhere else, I'm sure, the issue is not finding a contractor. I know in LA County alone, there's over 20,000 licensed contractors, licensed general contractors alone. So the issue is not finding one, it's finding the right one, someone that's good, someone that you can trust. And the good help are busy, right? The good general contractors and the good subcontractors are busy. So it will always come down to how much time do you have, or do you want to give yourself to complete the project? How much money do you have to budget for the project? And that's really the two sliding scales that will dictate what your project's going to look like, how long it's going to take, and how much it's going to cost.
Hey, David, I want to piggyback on what Jon just said, because I've seen enough of these bids in my line of work. I actually have noticed a trend. I had a client bid his own project with a set of subs, was going to owner GC the whole thing. And then I had him go get 2 bids from 2 separate contractors because he wanted to see the price comparison. It was actually cheaper for him to go with the GC than it was for him to do it himself. Mm-hmm. Because the 2 GCs that he was working with, like Jon is talking about, have subs that they consistently keep busy. Those subs give them a 10% discount off the top because they're booked out for 9 months. And so the individual homeowner can't get that discount because their project is maybe not in line with timelines of whatever that GC has lined up. And additionally, when you're dealing with people and you already have a full-time job, you're now full-time jobbing project management and making sure all these subs show up on time. And it's your job to manage that job site. So you need to be there 24/7. So this gentleman went through all of this and found that it would have cost him about $50,000 more to do it himself from a time perspective because of his hourly wage, and just how much extra it cost him because the subs all had to come in individually and he had to manage each individual phase of his project. Now, this was one person. This was in Seattle, Washington. This was a unique case in that regard. But I agree with you, Jon. I don't think that we're now moving to a place where we're labor shortage, we're supply shortage, and GCs are booked for 9 to 12 months. So finding a sub on your own is going to cost more than it would for you to go through a GC. We're seeing that on the lending side every day.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that Hillary brings up. And Michael, since you were here early on, you definitely have been doing your homework. You've been talking to subs. I think you have a very healthy perspective of it. Before Clayton jumped on, I mentioned what a Gantt chart is, and that's one of the things that Clayton is very good at building and putting together. He does that a lot. And one of the things I wanted to kind of feature, because I'm going to bounce around a little bit with our panelists here, is Clayton has a permit expediter. But what I've been sending clients over to him are the ones that are in Los Angeles that are on these very dynamic properties that have hillsides all over the place. They're super steep, and they probably have a retaining wall that is probably not going to be permitted if they wanted to just go build their ADU and build their permits. So Clayton, if you can kind of talk about, I think with the first one we had, this gentleman who had a really high point on his property, may require some entitlements, because I don't know what entitlements are or what that means.
Sure. So answering it in pieces here, an entitlement is a planning permit. So versus a building and safety permit, which is a permit for engineering and a structure, sometimes a little bit of zoning and some other things. A planning permit is a permit for the use of land. And sometimes you'll be getting special permissions, like a certain height limit. In the city of LA, if you have a retaining wall, you're allowed a certain amount of retaining walls. It's two retaining walls up to 10 feet high. And then if you have anything more than 2 or higher than 10 feet, it triggers a special approval from planning, which you have to notify all the neighbors. It's quite expensive. And then kind of to the other part of that, which is unpermitted retaining walls or just unpermitted things in general, is shockingly common. I had some best friends that bought a property, bought their first house recently, and they called me up wanting to add a second ADU on the first house. And the first thing you have to do, a lot of people say, well, this is what's existing. And they don't really appreciate that what may be existing on the property may not be existing to the city. So kind of one of the first steps is doing the research on the property and figuring out what is existing to the city. Because if you have a big, something kind of a big item, like you're needing an entitlement for a retaining wall, well, your 6-month permit just turned into a 12-month permit. And that's not, it can be a project killer. So those are the kind of things you want to know up front. Doing the research and making sure that you're not going to be biting off more than you can chew is very, very important.
Thank you for that. And I that's one of the things where, as I've mentioned before, there's like so many things to deal with and to kind of take into keep in mind as you're going forward. I'm seeing them on across different types of projects. Where an example, Michael has his own individual project, which is a garage conversion. The things that you have to keep in mind, I think, are very critical, because as I understood, and help me with this, Clayton, is like if I would have said, okay, here's a complete plan set, we gave them to you to take to the city, and you did not do any sort of review. Let's say I took them down there. Then it could trigger all of these investigations. So my budget at $250,000 for an ADU is now going to involve potentially a deal breaker as far as the components that it may need to ensure that there is a properly permitted, engineered, designed retaining wall.
Sure. And I mean, I can give an example. I'm sitting in an ADU that I built at my house. And also I'll humbly say that I've made every mistake that's been brought up so far. We under budgeted it. We thought that we're construction experts, right? I do this every day. I know tons of contractors. We'll go owner builder. We'll knock this thing out. Costed more, all kinds of snags. And then one of the great ones was, I permitted it myself. I'm a permitting expert. So I, tried to do it as bare bones as possible. I somehow pushed it through the city. That wall behind me is on the property line. It's an existing wall in a garage conversion. But we didn't do a survey. I was able to convince the city not to accept a survey. At the 11th hour before our final inspection, the city inspector goes, I want a survey for that. And so then I had to go track down a surveyor to do a rush job. I think I called in a favor, but it was still several $1,000s. And it definitely took a couple weeks, and then had to get to the city and they had to process it. So, experience isn't always going to save you, but it's nice to have a team of people who feel responsible and give yourself all the tools you can.
Thank you for that, Clayton. I appreciate it. And I want to kind of sprinkle that in, because there's so many things that, again, people might be watching this recording and they can understand just who's on this panel. Garage conversions from an energy efficiency standpoint. Roy, if you could talk about that, what are you seeing? Are you involved? Do you see very many of them?
Yeah, so garage conversions are actually pretty common. It's an easy way to save money in regards to the requirements for your Title 24. The reason being is usually if you're to do a ground up ADU, you're subject to having the new construction standards where you have solar, or you're subject to 2x6 walls and having to insulate to higher R values. But with garage conversions, that's counted as technically a remodel or an addition to your total conditioned floor area. We can keep the existing framing that's there. You don't have to sister frame on 2x6s, keep the 2x4s, have R15, no solar requirements. And essentially you're just tearing up the sheetrock that's existing in the garage, re-insulating, and then putting in all the rest of the appliances. I think that drastically cuts the cost both for the design side, because there's less headache into it, as well as for the construction. So it's a great idea to look into garage conversions rather than ground up ADUs, pending what your desires are.
But it would still be subjected to HERS testing. and
Yes.
and a Title 24, right?
That's correct. It's
Compliant.
it's a lot easier since the guidelines for your Title 24 requirements are subject to additions and alterations rather than new
Right.
construction.
Sure.
So you're allowed to circumvent that new construction route, which is a big deal for Title 24.
Right.
And the
that's what we're
Hearst
seeing a
testing.
lot of.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's there's a gentleman on the How to ADU page who is doing courses on garage conversions, and he's done 40 or 50 of them. And because again they are significantly less expensive, and you can get them done fairly quickly. And John, are you seeing many of those come across your desk?
Am I seeing garage conversions? Tons of them. I'm just going to echo what multiple people have already said. I'd say let's say we get 100 ADU projects, I'd say 60 to 70% of them, 60 to 70 of those 100 are garage conversions, or at least
those are all significantly
starting.
below 200,000, aren't they?
Yeah, I would say my answer to that question from 3 years ago is different than 2 years ago, is different than last year, is different than today. But yeah, I'd say on average, if you're looking at a typical 350 to 400 square foot garage, if it's in good condition to start with, those are coming in around 100. I've seen some for the cost of construction. I mean, as low as 90,000 right now, and as high as 120, 130,000, with mid-range to high-end finishes.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. That was pretty excellent. Michael, we just threw a lot of information at you. I'm going to give you a chance for some questions.
Okay, I do. I have a question for Clayton. When you talked about surveys, and I want to know when a survey is not needed.
So the critical piece of a survey is that you're defining where your property lines are. So the main reason that you need a survey is to verify that you're not within the yards. So typically a yard is about 5 feet from the rear and side property lines. It can be more.
Let me stop you for a second. So you're saying like the setbacks and those kind of things. Okay, but say a garage conversion where it already exists and you're not adding any square footage.
Well, it gets tricky, right? So that's what I did here. I added a little bit, but where it got me was that the existing garage didn't have footings. So we had to go back in, and to bring it up to structural code, we had to add footings. And so that problematic property wall on the neighbor's property line, we had to excavate under that and put in footings. And so that's what triggered the survey on ours. And your plan checker is typically going to want to look at a survey anytime you're close to the property line. So if you have an existing building on the property line, if it has footings and it as is, you can roll the dice. And like, look, honestly, I kind of knew that could come up at any point on this project, and we kind of took the chance because we know what a survey costs. But those are the kind of things that come up on projects, and we could have got by without it. The inspector could have been cool and been like, whatever, I have enough experience to know not to fight it. It was a legit call, and we didn't waste any time. We got one and we got it done. But if you have an existing one, I would say if you have an existing building with sitting on the property line, you're probably going to need a survey.
Okay. So the other question is, I've been down to building safety. I've probably been there about 8 or 9 times. And when I first went there, they said, oh, that you can do, you could do 2 ADUs. This is on a property that's already, it's a 4-unit building with a 5-car garage. So then, when I went back and was dropping off some preliminary plans, they said that, oh no, that you can only do 25% of what you have. So if you have a 4-unit building, you can only add 1 ADU. If you have an 8-unit building, then you can add 2. Okay, so now I was just told this week that all of this stuff has changed and that you could do the ADU and then you can do a junior ADU. But I thought the junior ADU had to be attached to the home.
I can talk about that, Michael. You're talking about a fourplex, correct?
Correct.
So any sort of multifamily zone property can have a minimum of 2 ADUs. If you're going larger, let's say you have an 8, then you start to get into a 25, the percentages, but by the minimum you're allowed to. JADUs do not apply to multifamily, only for single family where the owner resides in it, because that is the condition of the entitlement. The jurisdiction you're going to be built that you're in is going to get you to sign something, a declaration that says I will be living in the primary or in the J.
Right.
And you can't do it otherwise.
So
Okay.
People do.
I would also add the advice more in a general sense that the experience that you just described, where you go down and you talk to one person, they tell you one thing, you go down and talk to another person, tell you another thing. That's my life in a nutshell. And that is the city experience. That's not unusual, and it is frustrating. And I'm sorry, but that is the situation that we're in. What I would tell you is that it's great to be hands-on. It's great to go down to the city. I have clients that go down to the city and try and bust me and make sure that what I'm telling them is honest. And I think that's a great practice. Sometimes they find things out. Sometimes somebody's telling me bogus information and I'm being complacent and taking their word for it. So going down there is not a bad thing, but I would also caution you against trying to find definite information, and just kind of put forth a reasonable effort, and try and get some answers, try and get a feel, try and get a figure for these possible directions, and then also get a team, right? Like, you're going to have an architect or an engineer on to submit plans to the city. They should be able to answer these questions, and they should have an idea. And one other thing I'll say is it's almost not worth it to try and engage the city if you don't have hard plans and they're not giving you something in writing. You can have these verbal conversations and you can waste your lifetime going through all the different hypothetical scenarios or how they're feeling that day. They'll give you comments. You want something code-based in writing so that you can look that code up. If something's going to kill your project, you want the ability to look at the building code and say, okay, this is legit. This is the law. We need to figure out how to make this work.
Look, Michael has plans, it looks like.
Hey, it didn't start that way. It started on a napkin.
See, you're following it along. The one thing I want to throw in is if anybody's following Ryan O'Connell on his YouTube channel, you should. He has a great little, I think, a 9-minute piece about the new 2023 laws. To what Clayton was just talking about, is that when you submit to your jurisdiction, all of the agencies have 60 days to be able to respond, and if they if they decline you, they have to put in writing exactly what you need to do or what they found wrong. So that's a huge change. Also, there's a bunch of things that have to do with setbacks. The setbacks from a property line cannot prevent you from building an ADU, I think up to 800 square feet, which is massive. Because in Burbank, and around LA, you have these properties that have houses in way back, but then they have these huge front yards. And I had an initial client a couple years ago, that wanted to build, and the city said she couldn't. I just emailed her today saying, hey, guess what? In 2023, you're probably going to be able to do what you want to do. So depending on when you submit, Michael, it may be a little bit easier and be able to go through a lot quicker, or at least someone like Clayton is going to be able to have this, stick, to say, the state said you had to, but it has been there for the last couple of years, and do you really use it? Not really, but at least, the Sacramento is coming down with some kind of guidelines to make it a little bit easier because the bottom line is, Michael, they want additional housing. They want you to do those 2 ADUs that you want to do. Right. I mean, it's a very sincere thing. If I may, Michael, I have another question here by Yez. And Yez, if I'll just ask the question on your behalf because you typed it in, is anything to look out for when you already have a permitted garage conversion as an ADU, but just want to remodel it to include a new bathroom? Specifically, you just want to make the bathroom ADA accessible. And what things would kind of jump out, John or Clayton?
On my end, sorry, Clayton, we both thought about it at the same time. To me, this is just a normal remodel. If the bathroom already exists within the garage and everything's permitted and fully up to snuff, then it's just remodeling a bathroom, because as far as the permits go, as far as I understand, that bathroom is the same as the bathroom in the house.
Yeah, that was kind of the direction I was going to go in. Is there's kind of a difference between making something ADA compliant on your own choice and the city making you make something ADA compliant. So when the city makes, like, say you have a commercial building, if it's open to the public, it has to be ADA compliant oftentimes. And so that can really create problems. Like bathroom stalls have to be a certain width. I've seen, you know, crazy expensive renovations in commercial situations because they had to meet ADA compliance, and they've spent $100,000 on a $50,000 construction project to meet ADA compliance, whereas a normal homeowner would kind of like find some kind of Mickey Mouse way to make it wheelchair accessible, or say, okay, like if someone's in here with a wheelchair, they can do with 2 inches of clearance that the law maybe wanted us to put in there. So in terms of making something ADA accessible, it's essentially a bathroom remodel. Most architects that deal with commercial deal with a lot of ADA, so they're going to kind of know the major pitfalls for that. I would just kind of make sure that you have an architect or a designer who has some commercial experience, because those are really the people who deal with ADA the most.
Thank you, Clayton. And yes, if there's any other kind of follow-up questions you have, feel free to jump on, raise a hand, put it into the chat, but I do appreciate the question very much. Will, I know you very well, and you are, I think, here. Let's see, is Will still here, or did he jump off? Yes, he's still here. So Will Johnson had a question about ADUs and junior ADUs. Are attached garage conversions considered junior ADUs? Then how about detached garage conversions? Are they JADUs? So John, if you could answer that, please.
Yeah, I saw we both touched on it. So if anyone else has other information that conflicts, let me know, because this is my understanding of it. But if the garage is attached to the home and it is, and the finished space that you're converting into an ADU is below 500 square feet, by definition, you can convert, or you can permit it as a junior ADU or an ADU. We've already talked about some of the main differences, but there are a number of them and should certainly be taken into consideration. But to answer your question about detached, doesn't matter with the square footage, doesn't matter the size. A detached garage conversion currently cannot be a junior ADU. You can only permit it as an ADU.
Thank you, and that is my understanding as well. And the reason I want to bring that up is you brought up a good point: 500 square feet or below, which is important. Also, it needs to be owner occupied. That one of those has to have it in there as well too.
Right. Sorry, David. One more thing I wanted to touch on that is I mentioned the finished space. So I have seen projects in the past where a garage was 600 square feet, but then they kept about 200, 150 to 200 square feet of that garage, kept that as parking, and converted the remaining space. That was also permittable as a junior. They ended up doing the ADU, but they did have the option, because it doesn't matter how big the structure is, it matters how big the finished space was, and that finished space was around 400.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. A couple of things that I kind of had written down is the things that are going to be coming down with the new laws. There's going to be height limitation increases. You're going to be able to do 2 stories. I think there's a lot of exciting things. Do pay attention if you have not submitted for your permits. And so just keep that in mind. On the How to ADU Facebook page, someone recently posted that what do they do when they've given their general contractor $1,000 and they've already done trenching and done some demolition and have basically abandoned the job. So John, what would you recommend to somebody like that who's just like, I'm out $1,000, and do I chase them down, or complaints or whatever? And the reason I bring that up and I wrote that note is when Michael was asking the question of like, I will only hire people that have great recommendations. And the response that the person on the Facebook page has, which has 17,800 people now, was that I did vet them. I did look at the reviews. And now they've basically, I gave them my money and I can't get a hold of them. What would you recommend?
So there's a number of things at play here. One, you're exactly right. There's a million different ways to vet a contractor. So just because you looked at their reviews online and the reviews looked good, and maybe they had pictures on their website that looked good, those do not necessarily indicate that you are hiring a good contractor. So there, with my company, we put together a 10-point screening process that we use to evaluate every single contractor before inviting them into our network. Happy to dive into that if people are interested, but to stay on topic here, if I hired a contractor and I vetted them and I know that they're licensed and insured and bonded and everything else, but they end up disappearing from the job. If it's a garage conversion or anything bigger than that, you're spending 100K plus. It's very unfortunate that you lost that $1,000. It will likely be difficult to get that $1,000 back from that contractor. You should certainly go after their license and try to get whatever you can back, or at least make sure that that contractor can no longer do business under that license. But at that point, it's unfortunate that your work site is in shambles right now, and it may very well be for some time, but I'd recommend finding another contractor. Going above and beyond the steps that you had previously taken to vet contractors, work with a company like mine or any of the other ones that can help you find good, vetted, reliable contractors, and just take the loss. It's a relatively, $1,000 is a lot of money, but it's a relatively small hit relative to the overall size of the project. So just accept it, move on. It's not going to be worth the headache to try to get that contractor to come back and finish the job. Find another contractor, make sure they're good, make sure that you take whatever steps are necessary to evaluate and screen that contractor, but also set up a contract in place that will do your best to protect yourself from situations like these.
And thank you for that, John. And I'm going to jump over to Hillary because I had a question about third-party or escrow accounts. When you were talking about construction loans, before we do that, Michael, did you have any follow-up questions for John? Because I know we were spending a lot of good time talking about these garage conversions because they're being done all over the place. So it's important to drill down because you've been really great on asking some very probative questions. You are muted.
The only thing I was just thinking, John, as you were speaking, and thinking about what you had said before about the range of the profit margin for different contractors. And I would say, well, since you've already vetted them, and then I would come to you and say, give me one of your contractors on the lower end, on the lower cost scale, or the lower, I think you said was it like 15 to 20% or 10 to 25% or whatever? I would just think, well, if that's the case, then don't give me the 25% guy.
So one thing I'll say on that is a contractor's profit margin or their profit and overhead is not the only factor that plays into the overall cost or the price that they give you. Every contractor, every general contractor is different. Some people call them paper contractors. They don't have any of their own crews and they only hire licensed subcontractors. That's one way to do it. And as long as you know that that general contractor is good and that their subs are good, then you're in good shape. But typically, since they don't have any of their own crew in-house, they're spending more to hire these subcontractors. Whereas another contractor may have a majority of the trades in-house of employees that they pay a salary to. So they don't need to pay them per job. They don't need to pay them typically as much as another contractor would pay a sub. So that's a few of the factors there. Newer contractors may likely charge a lower fee, but still be more than competent and capable to do a great job. And sometimes contractors who have been in business for 10 or 20 years, they may still only charge 15, 17, 18% of a profit and overhead margin. And that is just how they choose to run their business. So just because a contractor does take 20% or 25% profit and overhead, their cost or their final price to you may still somehow be cheaper than a very high-end contractor that is charging a lower profit margin.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. And that goes to a little bit of what Hillary said too, is that she'd had a client who got bids, and then when they compared them to what the individual subs were charging, it was similar or less. So, but the one thing I want to kind of touch on, because there's so much to cover, and I know we only have a couple more minutes, is when you're doing a construction loan, you're hiring hopefully a trusted or at least an experienced GC, one of the things that they do have is called an escrow account. And if you can talk about that just for a minute.
Yeah, so typically the escrow account isn't, with construction loans, we don't have an escrow account. With construction loans, we'll have the construction budget, and we will hold that in a construction disbursement account, which I guess you could call it an escrow account, but it's not actually held by escrow. So it's held by our construction disbursement teams. Every bank has a different disbursement system. That could be a third-party vendor. It could be an in-house holding account. And that holding account is going to be where you draw the funds from throughout the build. And in real time, you should see down to the penny what's in that account. Now, some banks do still hold it with escrow. I think there might be like one or two still left out in the world that truly do hold an escrow account. But the idea behind the escrow account comment is that once you do a construction loan, the funds for your build go into a holding account and they are dispersed to the contractor as he or she completes their work. So it's not, you're going to get X amount up front, we're going to give you 50%. That's not how construction loans work. It actually is percentage of work completed, which is a great double check for people who are worried about their money. Where's their money going? Is the project being done the right way? The bank is sending inspectors every month. We're making sure that, hey, is this being done the right way? And so an escrow account in and of itself is a holding account for the construction funds. It's not always going to have that name. 9 times out of 10, it'll be called a construction disbursement account. And it does holds and houses all of the funds that are dispersed as the work is completed. That is 80 to 90% of lenders in the construction space. Some lenders do their project totally different. So as a consumer, when you are interviewing a construction lender, one of the big questions you should be asking that lender is, how do construction disbursements happen? And what's the process? How's my builder going to get paid? Are you giving him a lump sum? Is it monthly? Is it on work completed? Because that's going to be your double check on the system.
Thank you, Hillary. I appreciate that. So, Josh, I know you've been sitting there patiently. I want to kind of give you an opportunity to kind of talk about things. If you have any thoughts as we wrap up, from a do-it-yourselfer, a builder, and having, for those of you who weren't here in the beginning, Josh built a 600 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath ADU, nearly net zero. He's going to know in about 12 months after it's been occupied. And any sort of advice to people that are here or watching it, thinking about doing an owner builder or do it yourself?
Oh man.
And you got a minute.
Oh yeah, that's sure. That's enough time. I think you cannot do too little research and gather as much information from this group of professionals here as possible, because there are so many variables. I built it myself because I had years of experience in all the trades, but I also took longer time doing it, and I incorporated it higher energy efficient technology than most people would, and it ended up being very expensive on a per square foot basis. But if you don't care about all the stuff that I did, then you can do it for a lot cheaper. But there's so many variables in here. I think the person who's ahead of the, in charge of the project needs to do their homework and say, what do I really want out of this? What is my budget? And what are my variables? Who am I going to get to build this? GC, do it myself, subs. It can go across the board everywhere. It's crazy. It's hard to nail it down.
Thank you, Josh, and I appreciate that. So if anybody wants to get a hold of Josh, if you're watching this, kind of reach out to me and I can get you in touch with him, with anybody that's here. Roy, you are one of my most articulate, Ask a Pro panelist. You were very succinct. We covered a lot of information on the energy efficiency. Any sort of closing thoughts or comments as it pertains to garage conversions, things to consider, any recommendations or any sort of insight you would have to somebody who's kind of trying to tackle that project?
Well, specifically for garage conversions, it's only getting easier as we go on, I would say, with especially the new code change next year as well. As David and I touched base on the last episode, we're now allowed the solar exemption credit for ADUs 500 square feet or less that have 1.8 kilowatt requirements. And we are also allowed for electric resistance water heaters, which is a big change where we don't have to use the heat pump water heaters. Huge thing for garage conversion ADUs, big money saver right there. And we're still allowed the Blueprint 122 exemption for where we can keep the existing 2x4 framing instead of burn out to 2x6. So I'd say it's just getting easier as we keep going.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. John, any closing thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, David. I will carry out my obligation and my commitment to preach the contractor gospel. Hire a good, trusted, reliable contractor. I'm going to paste, I'm sorry if this counts as self-promotion, I'm pasting a link to our vetting process. I did not invent a fancy magical algorithm. All we did was come up with every single way we could think of to thoroughly screen contractors, and it is publicly on my website. So take a look. These are the 10 steps that we carry out. Most of them you can do yourself, if not all of them. And if not, just give us a call, ask any questions that you need. We work with tons of homeowners on ADU projects, as everyone else here is an excellent resource, whether it's about financing or permitting or energy or anything under the sun. These people here know what they're talking about. Lean on us. We're all very helpful. We extend ourselves as much as we can at no cost at all. So use us as resources, whether you want to do it yourself, whether you want to sub it out yourself, or if you want to hire a general contractor. Just like Josh said, make sure you do your homework. And just like Hillary said, it's not just a basic project. You are building a small house, and it is a significant undertaking. So make sure you know what you're doing and do it right.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. And Clayton, I'm going to give you the last comments.
Holy smokes, John got me fired up. You know, I think I'm just going to echo the kind of sentiment that I've been hearing throughout this, which is, you know, trust but verify. Get a good team, get good experts, do all the research that you can do, and be as hands-on as you can be. This is a huge investment in your life and your financing, and you need it to go right. Don't be overly optimistic, because it will come back and bite you. And through the permitting process, you know, a good architect and a good engineer is day and night. Find this, just like you would with a contractor. You got to vet those people. You need trusted people who have experience and who have completed projects.
Perfect timing, Clayton. Thank you very much. Dennis, we don't have enough time to get to your question. That would be a good one to reach out to Hillary. Hillary, before we log off, you could put your contact information again so he can grab that. I don't remember when Dennis logged in. If he didn't log in when you first posted it, he may not be able to see it. But Dennis, that's going to be the question, and Hillary's going to be able to send you something that's going to be able to answer that for you. To everybody that logged in who has been here with the questions, I would really want to appreciate Michael for his really good questions about something that's being done the most frequently, which are garage conversions. You are going to need somebody like Roy, who's an energy expert, to kind of do some evaluations. It's very likely if you want to get a HELOC or you're going to do some sort of construction loan, you're going to talk to somebody like Hillary. If you want to be provided the best opportunities to have the job go as smoothly as possible, you're going to hire somebody like John and his team. And if you want to do an initial evaluation, you know, it's going to be also critical to hire somebody like Clayton to talk to him, not only for your permit expediting, but it's just like, let's take a grand overview, particularly if you have something that's going to be a little bit more kind of complex, is to do it that way too. And there's going to be opportunities if you're looking to do your own job and you want to have some insight, but you want to have a little bit of coaching. Let's say it's not as simple as a garage conversion, but as a detached. You know, Josh has a lot of expertise, and he is now just coming into working as a consultant. I think his insight has been fabulous. This will be posted on our social media pages, and I'll be able to provide this recording to all of the panelists that are here. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for this open forum. I hope we can do it again. Any feedback is appreciated, and everybody have a wonderful day. Take care, guys. All right, bye-bye.